China, China, como las barbas del coco, que el que bese tu boquita, si no muere, queda loco. Si vieras, chiquita, que cuánto te quiero, no más porque dices que viva Madero. Si tú me quisieras como yo te quiero, iríamos los dos a pelear por Madero. Eres China, 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 como las barbas del coco, y el que bese tu boquita, si no muere, queda loco. Si vieras, chiquita, que cuánto te quiero, no más porque dices que viva Madero. Si tú me quisieras como yo te quiero, iríamos los dos a pelear por Madero.
The historical IG&N Railroad Station, and this was the place of arrival of Francisco y Madero in the late afternoon of Friday, October the 7th. Francisco Madero got off the train here at the International Great Northern Railroad Station and the Cattleman Square across the station. He was well dressed in a suit he bought in Laredo, Texas, after walking through the International Bridge between the two Laredos, but he came dressed as a railroad man. Madero got here first, as was heralded in the San Antonio Express News on October 8th of 1910. It said that it was for an extended stay in the Hutchins house at 205 Garden Street, now St. Mary Street. On the 8th of October, his wife, Sara Pérez de Madero, his secretary, Julio Peña, his personal secretary, and el licenciado Roque Estrada, el doctor Rafael Cepeda, and Elías de los Ríos, their friends and revolutionary colleagues, arrived at these stations in San Antonio, Texas.
Cometa, si hubieras sabido lo que venías anunciando, nunca hubiera salido por el cielo relumbrando. No tienes la culpa tú, mi Dios que te lo ha mandado. Ay, qué Madero tan hombre, bonitas son sus acciones. Mandó a los cabecillas echar fuera las prisiones. Madre mía de Guadalupe, llénalo de bendiciones. Madero con su asistente sufrió muy crueles tormentos, vino conquistando gente y formando regimientos para echar fuera a Porfirio con todo su ayuntamiento. Yachi, qué bonito, está lloviendo en el cerro. Ensíllenme en mi caballo, yo ya me voy con Madero, porque me esperan las tropas y fuerzas del extranjero. Aquí va la despedida con cariño verdadero. Estas son las mañanitas de don Francisco y Madero. Que vivan los mexicanos, que viva México entero.
On November 18th of 1910, the conspiracy against Porfirio Díaz was discovered in the city of Puebla. Aquiles Cerdán and all his family was killed on that night. So formally, the Mexican Revolution started on November 18th of 1910 with that tragic event. We are right here across Santa Rosa Street, where the print shop of Paulino Martinez was located in the number 122 of Santa Rosa Street, across the Market Square, El Mercado, and across the Plaza del Zacate, which now is called Milan Park. At that time it was Plaza del Zacate, and the Market Square was right across Paulino Martinez's print shop. Commerce Street is to the right and Houston Street is to the left, standing in front of what was Paulino Martinez print shop, where the Plan de San Luis was printed, 5,000 copies that were later on distributed throughout Mexico, Mexico City, and the city of Puebla. Following the steps that Madero had here in San Antonio, now we are here in the 400 block of Main. Madero and his sisters lived in 437 Main Street, and the house was called the White House. Nowadays, that house doesn't exist. Here we have a parking lot of a hotel. Across the street, in the whole block, we have an arts center. In the year of 1910, Madero and his sisters had their White House here in Main Street, 437 Main Street, 110 years ago.
En lo alto de una abrupta serranía, acampado se encontraba un regimiento y una moza que valiente lo seguía, locamente enamorada del sargento, popular entre la tropa era Nerita, la mujer que el sargento idolatraba, porque además de ser valiente era bonita, y hasta el mismo coronel la respetaba, y se oía que decía aquel que tanto la quería: si acaso yo muero en campaña y mi cadáver a la sierra va a quedar, Adelita, por Dios te lo ruego, que en tus ojos me vayas a llorar. Y si Adelita quisiera ser mi esposa, y si Adelita fuera mi mujer, le compraría un vestido de seda para llevarla a bailar al cuartel.
We are traveling now to the route that Madero traveled here in San Antonio, and we just arrived to where it was this address, 520 West Macon Street. It was the house of Ernesto Fernandez Arteaga. Madero spent his first night here in the home of Ernesto Fernandez, and here in that house established his revolutionary headquarters. From San Antonio, Madero called upon his political and financial ties throughout the border region. Through his contacts and personal wealth, he was able to mount an intelligence operation and hire legal attorneys. His moderate political views gained him support on both sides of the border. Madero's first step in San Antonio was to declare himself president of a revolutionary junta. In this house, 520 West Macon, where we are right across that street, Macon, and we are standing in Euclid, across the street where 520 Macon was standing. Here, the expatriates, including Juan Andrew Almazan, Cesar Lopez de Lara, the owner of the house, Ernesto Fernandez Arteaga, Enrique Bordes Mangel, Juan Sánchez Ascona, and Madero, This group of men finished El Plan de San Luis, gave the last touch, and then this plan called for action and was set forth to distribute it in November under the name Plan de San Luis. The Plan de San Luis was predated to Madero's last night in San Luis Potosi on October the 5th. The reason was that it was a way to avoid any legal problems with the United States of America. The Plan de San Luis declared the election held 6 months earlier to be void and called for an armed revolution to begin at 6 p.m. on November the 20th of 1910 against the illegitimate dictatorship of Diaz. At the same time, Madero would declare himself provisional president of Mexico, calling for a general refusal to acknowledge the central government, restitution of land to the villages and Indian communities, and freedom for political prisoners. So we are right here where Madero and the group of revolutionaries came to finish the Plan de San Luis in the house of Ernesto Fernandez Arriaga in 520 West Macon Street.
Yo soy relera, tengo mi Juan, eres mi encanto, yo soy su querer. Cuando me dicen que ya se va el tren, adiós mi relera, se va tu querer. Tengo mi par de pistolas para la revolución, con ella voy a la bola a matar puro pelo. Yo soy relera, tengo mi Juan, él es mi encanto, yo soy su querer. Cuando me dicen que ya se va el tren, adiós mi rielera, se va tu querer. Tengo mi par de caballos para la revolución. Uno se llama el canario y otro se llama el gorrión. Yo soy rielera, tengo mi Juan, él es mi encanto, yo soy su querer. Cuando me dicen que ya se va el tren, adiós mi rielera, se va tu querer.
Section of St. Mary's and East Nueva, South St. Mary's. Madero checked into rooms at the Hutchins house, which was in this intersection, 205 Garden Street. He also established part of the headquarters in exile. Madero's father, Francisco Sr., brothers Emilio, Adolfo, and Gustavo, and sisters all joined him at the Hutchins within a few weeks. Francisco Madero's grandfather had traded cotton and cattle in San Antonio and spent some of the proceeds here. Madero women had attended the Ursuline Academy and shopped at Joski's. Family members had kept accounts with the Bruce and Lockwood banks and had been patients of doctors Ferdinand and Adolphe Herf. His brothers Adolfo and Gustavo also spent time here, sometimes breaking their journeys to and from New York to seek support for the revolutionary cause.
Vamos al baile y verás qué bonito, donde se alumbran con 20 linternas, donde se bailan las danzas modernas, donde se baila de mucho carquís. Y quiéreme Jesucita, y quiéreme por favor, y mira que soy tu amigo, y seguro servidor. Y quiéreme Jesucita, y quiéreme por favor, y mira que soy tu amigo, y seguro servidor. Vamos al baile y verás qué bonito, donde se alumbran con 20 linternas, donde se bailan las danzas modernas, donde se baila de mucho carquís.
1910, not far from the Hutchins, the King William neighborhood was also the scenery of revolutionary organizing for acquisition of arms and ammunitions. having in some of the houses and in King William Park secret meetings. Currently, we are in the main section of King William area district, and here is the current King William Park. 303 King William was home of Vinton James, who provided name and cover address and help in arms shipments. We are one block from King William on Madison. 236 Madison was home of Carden Cerdán, sister of Aquiles Cerdán, both ardent revolutionaries. This is the 200 block going south of Madison. On 430 Madison, home of Dr. Francisco Vázquez Gómez, brother of Emilio Vázquez Gómez. 521 Madison was home of Emilio Vázquez Gómez, president of La Junta Revolucionaria and brother of Dr. Francisco Vázquez Gómez. Close to Madison, on 224 Adams, was home of Elisa Villarreal de Madero, helping in arms shipments. On the street of South Presa, we are on South Presa currently. At least 4 houses were home of revolutionaries. 224 South Presa was a cover for Madero and shipping place for crates containing arms. 421 South Presa, and we are on the 400 block of South Presa, was home of Alfonso Madero, Francisco Madero's brother. 422 South Presa was the home of Raúl Madero, Francisco Madero's brother. And 520 South Presa, going a little more towards the north, was home of Venustiano Carranza, a revolutionary from Coahuila. Not far from Presa Street, on Alamo Street, was another residence for Elizabeth Villarreal de Madero on 224 Alamo Street. And nearby, on 1131 South Alamo, was the home of Hugo Griesenbeck, old friend of Madero, who provided a cover address, bought arms, and provided a medium for the transfer of funds. We're at the intersection of Dwyer and East Nueva. 132 Dwyer was Centro de Refugiados Políticos Mexicanos. 309 Dwyer was home of Elias de los Rios and Julio Peña, Madero's secretary and valet. 311 and 313 Dwyer was home of Doña Diana Murgia de Chavarria, which served as offices of the revolution. On November 20th, 1910, Madero arrived at Ciudad Porfirio Díaz, modern-day Piedras Negras, Coahuila, to meet up with 400 men raised by his uncle Catarino to launch an attack on that town. However, his uncle was unable to gather enough men for the planned attack. Madero decided to postpone his attack on the Mexican side of the border, so he and his brother Raúl traveled incognito to New Orleans, Louisiana. Madero moved his operations to New Orleans and then to Dallas in January 1911. Madero re-entered Mexico from El Paso on February 14 of 1911. In Chihuahua, he led 130 men in an attack on Casas Grandes, Chihuahua. He spent the next months as the head of the Mexican Revolution. Madero successfully imported arms from the United States. The American government under William Howard Taft did little to halt the flow of arms to the Mexican revolutionaries. By April 1911, the revolution had spread to 18 states, including Morelos, where Emiliano Zapata was the leader. The Treaty of Ciudad Juárez allowed President Porfirio Díaz to resign on May 25, 1911. Díaz immediately set sail for France. Madero took office as President of the Republic of Mexico on November 6, 1911.